All right, we are live, and I'm already seeing some good action in the chat. One of my favorites. I feel like I've been seeing Amy all over the place. Book club on Tuesday, and now book club again today. I love it.
I know
Um,
Amy. Hi,
yeah,
Amy.
she's a keeper. She's a keeper.
Yeah.
I actually saw that you worked with Page Two, and I
Yes.
met Amy working with Andy Paul, who
Right.
also uses Page Two.
Andy Paul has told me to go to page two. That's how
Andy,
we
we
all
love
got the.
Andy Paul. We love it.
Page two owes Andy a lot of money.
I seriously like the amount of people that he has referred to them. He
Yep.
needs to get an affiliate link for Page Two.
For sure. For sure.
Oh, amazing. Richard, so excited to have you here today. The book, The Seller's Journey, your guidebook to closing more deals with Neat Selling. That's what we're going to dive into. As folks are joining, I'd love
Hmm.
to have them tell us where they are joining from, and where they are in the seller's journey. But in this case, I mean, are you an SDR? Are you in sales? So as folks are joining and telling us where they're from, what role they're in. Oh, where did you go?
I'm here.
Oh,
Okay.
tell us about yourself.
You got a little glitchy on me. You want me to? I can do that. That's
Oh,
no problem.
weird. Yeah, let me
All right.
close some stuff out over here. Sometimes StreamYard is just a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to hear things about you, though. That's what I'm asking. Tell me all the things about you.
Let's see. I like nice long walks on the beach and
Surfing,
right.
Costa
I like
Rica.
surfing, Costa Rica. Um, no, I no, as my mom said, I've been in sales all my life. My first real sales job was probably in fifth or sixth grade selling Jolly Ranchers. I bought them from a high school kid for a quarter a pack and sold them for 50 cents a pack and in middle school. And that was probably my first real sales job. And I like making money. So that's the basics of it. I've done everything from being an SDR to BDR to AE, VP of sales, director of sales, head of sales ops. Like I've kind of done it all. I like to say I have a liberal arts degree in sales because I've done so much. And fell into this consulting role literally 12 years ago. Was at a great startup, and they were getting acquired, and they didn't need my role at that point, so they hugged me out the door. And people started asking me for help, and I'm like, I could charge money for this, and I could charge more money than what I'm getting in a salary. So had a couple of clients, got some advice along the way, and talked to my wife, and here we are. So that's the quick version.
I love it. I love it. From slinging Jolly Ranchers,
Yeah.
to being one of the best known sales consultants out there. That's a meteoric rise. I'm here for it.
Thank you.
For folks that don't know me, I'm Leslie. I'm the founder of the Sales Led GTM agency. Love talking about all things outbound, buyer centricity, blurring the lines between demand gen and lead gen. And I'm also the founder of Business Book Club, which is what you're part of right now. This is a bonus session for Business Book Club. They are always free and on LinkedIn Live and generally focus on sales, books. We have our regular sessions that are invite only and hosted on Zoom, and those are not sales books. They're never sales books, but they, I would argue, are books that can help you sell better, live better. Last month, we did Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets, which was so good. Next month is Amy Edmondson's The Right Kind of Wrong, and then books like, Ikigai, Atomic Habits, Deep Work. So I'll drop a link if folks want to learn more about the Business Book Club sessions as well. Just put that in the chat. But today we are here to talk about the seller's journey. Big fan of this book, Richard. Like even before we went live, I said this was more of a fun run of show to put together because we have such a similar mindset and philosophy and passion for sales. So I'm super excited to dig in. And one of the topics that we bonded about is that sales is an honorable profession, and it's a profession that we deserve to be proud of. Like we deserve to be proud of the work we do. just to kick us off, maybe there's some folks joining us that might listen back to this that are struggling with some shame about
Yeah,
being
yeah,
in sales. What
yeah.
would you say to them?
Well, it's interesting. So I have a belief, and people can certainly call me out on it, um, that the reason we get so much grief about being in sales and about being a used car salesperson goes all the way back to The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck. And
Okay.
there's this whole thing, right? You know, everybody from Oklahoma is being convinced to go to California for all these jobs that really actually didn't exist. And there's an entire chapter dedicated to a fast talking, slick used car salesman who's taking advantage of these farmers who don't know anything about cars and lying to them straight up about how good the car is going to be, that the tires are fine, all these things, so that when people buy these cars, they break down before they can really leave, and they have to go back and buy more stuff from the car sales guy. So,
Mm,
so I feel like that's where this whole philosophy comes from, because I don't know that Grapes of Wrath is still required reading, but if you think about the decades where that was required reading, it kind of got set in motion there. So anyway, and look, believe me, I've worked with car salespeople like buying a car, and they were horrible. Like they were terrible. So it didn't help. um, so the first thing is, like, this is our chosen profession, right? Like, if you are in sales and you're feeling like it's a dirty word, it might be time to check yourself. Like, if like it doesn't, like, it's okay, right? Look, I have no desire to be an accountant. Fucking hate that stuff all the time. I don't want to do it. So I'm not gonna go do it. So the first part is that's different, though, than if you're struggling and you like sales. If you're in sales and you're struggling, like it's been since, it's 2024 right now, and the last 2 years have been a struggle. Well, that's a very different emotional component to understand.
mm,
And it's still worth exploring. Do I want to be in sales or not? And it's worth exploring what kind of sales do I feel like I'm best suited for. So you still have to do this introspection thinking of yourself, but I think we have to own it. Like, look, yeah, I'm in sales. The first title of the book, before it became the seller's journey, it was going to be called Yes, I'm in Sales.
I love
Because
that. Is that the chat? That's the introduction, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yes. I'm in sales.
yeah, that's chapter 1, right? Yeah, I'm in sales. So we kind of have to understand what that means and own it. Um, and if you don't, that's okay. Like, if you realize this isn't for you, well, that's a great win, because now you're going to go find out what's your authentic self, right? Go find that other piece. Um, so I don't tell people to ignore that negative connotation or emotion that it might bring. I ask people to explore it and understand where it's coming from within you, and make a decision that you feel is the healthiest thing for you.
Yeah.
Part of that introspection will be, do you want to go through the ups and downs of sales, right? Do you want to be on that roller coaster? Rare is the person who's never on that roller coaster, right? Like, we hear about people, we know people who like make President's Club every year. And I will tell you, that's fine and dandy, but I also know a lot of those people are not happy in the other part of their life,
Exactly.
right?
Even if you're making
So
President's Club, it doesn't mean
yeah,
that you're living a
yeah.
wholehearted life.
No, look, when you die, it doesn't say 5 times President's Club winner on your tombstone. Like, that's not going on your
It's
tombstone.
not just your LinkedIn headline on your
Right.
tombstone, I'm sure.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. So,
Oh, that's great. Some really good takes. And I think one of the reasons that the introduction especially resonated with me is that I was that person when I started my sales career. I
we
took
all were, I think.
job, right? Like, by default, I was like embarrassed to tell people I was in sales. I think I'd like made it to the big city and I had this job. And then I felt in some way that I'd failed because I didn't have like a good
Yeah.
job. I just had a sales job. And it took me a couple of months in seat to
Look,
transition.
I say this all the time. People are like, it's funny. You go to a party and they're like, "What do you do?" "I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer." "What do you do, Richard?" I'm like, "I add more money to the economy than you will ever."
Like, I'm
And
in
they're like,
sales and I
"Oh,
actually make more
yeah,
money than
yeah."
you.
No, 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 no. It's not that I make more money than them. No, 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 no. It's that I add to the value of the world far more than they do. That I
Bold
taught
claim.
thousands of people how to do their job. I have, which equates to billions of dollars in the economy, right? Like lifelong. Like no doctor or lawyer can tell me they do that.
Okay, I like this bold claim. I like it.
And then they all look at, well, you're just a cocky salesperson. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You just think you're a heart surgeon. Okay. Short of you, whether you like him or not, short of you saving Elon Musk because of I mean, that guy affects a lot of people, whether you like him politically or not, short of that, you're not doing anything special for the world. I am. I'm actually keeping economies afloat. I'm actually helping people make money and put their kids through college, multiple people, right? Like that's what it means to say, yes, I'm in sales.
All right. Okay. You make another bold claim that I want to dig into as well, around there being no buyer's journey. But one thing I
Yeah.
do want to just really emphasize, because I think it was such an important point that you made, is that there are a lot of different types of sales.
Mhm.
Even if we just talk about within B2B, not even entering B2C sales into the equation. And something that I have seen in the past like 5 to 10 years, because there was such a tech sales boom, is that often folks only think of tech sales or SaaS sales when they think of good sales jobs. And many of them are very, very unhappy in that particular type of sales environment, sales cycle. And I love the call to action, that if folks are not loving their job, but they feel like sales is right to them, to give themselves permission to maybe try a field sales role, or maybe try something that is there's a lot of different types of ways to have a B2B sales job, and a lot of different types of products outside of tech sales. So, don't leave sales, maybe just try a different type of sell.
Look, believe me, Sherwin-Williams sells a lot of paint, and it's not, an order system, so to speak, right? They still go call on that local hardware store or the national chain hardware store. And if that's more your vibe in terms of like getting out to know the customer in that way, go explore it.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's so many look at the Fortune 100. There are a lot of non-tech companies there that have salespeople.
Yeah.
They aren't on the Fortune list because they're not selling. Right. So absolutely explore something that you're passionate about. I think we've all heard it, to your point. We've all heard like it's hard to sell something you don't care about. It's hard to sell a product that's not fun, right? Or that I can't stand behind. One of my favorite jobs was selling educational software way back in the day, right? Like it was like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego and Oregon Trail and all that stuff. But there's a tremendous level.
We got to forge the river, Richard.
Right. Exactly. Look, I've been selling long enough to say I sold in the 1900s. Right. But there was something massively altruistic about that. Right. That not only am I selling stuff, but I'm actually trying to affect the education of literally that, because we sold to every school district in the country, like thousands of kids. There's something cool about that. There are still textbooks out there that schools use. And, if that's meaningful to you, there's specific security technology schools use, right? And I'm talking like cybersecurity. I'm not even talking about the other stuff that's happening. You can find things that are meaningful to you, right? That will allow you to still follow your passion for sales if that's what you want.
Yeah. Incredible call to action. Okay, let's go back to your hot takes, your bold claims.
Sorry.
So another one of your bold claims, and maybe I'll preface this by saying I talk a lot about buyer centricity. I talk a lot about the buying process versus the sales process. You come out hot in this book and make the claim that we have been lied to. There is no buyer's journey.
Yes.
Stand your ground. Why is there only a seller's journey, and why do you care enough about that to write this entire guidebook?
Yeah. So, one, you just explained it. You just said, well, we have to talk about being buyer centric. We have to talk about having a process, right? All of that is designed to enhance the experience of the buyer. People remember you based on how you made them feel in life. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to make them feel good, because sometimes you're just an asshole, but that's just the case. So my point is very simply that there is no such thing as a buyer's journey. There's only a buyer's experience through a seller's journey. If you're going to explore purchasing something, there is either an experience you've had or an experience you want to avoid that's driving you. And then you go and you Google it. And then you go and you decide which of the 10 magic blue links you want to click on, which then means, Leslie and Richard had to spend hours figuring out the right headline, the right SEO, the right text underneath it, because that's part of the experience. Why am I clicking this link over the other one? Is it name recognition? Is it they said something that was important to me? There's an experience there. Then they go land on a website. We've all landed on websites where it's like, this is a terrible website. I'm out of here. It's not about the buyer's journey. That's about the buyer's experience. So the seller's journey is built to enhance that buyer's experience, and it's controlled by sales and marketing, right? Whether marketing controls the website or verbiage or language, that's still a sales function. Doesn't necessarily mean it reports to sales. And then sales and marketing have to work together to understand how to tell that story, right? But that's how I defend it. That's how I say it. So I've yet to have anybody kind of go, all I ever hear is yes, but. I don't ever hear you're wrong. So
you're wrong.
Feel free to challenge me. Go for it.
No, you're not wrong. But no, you're not wrong. I think that those are two very distinct things. And when one of the failings that I see in the way sellers and sales leaders approach sales is that they are very seller centric and thinking about only the steps that they need to accomplish and the boxes they need to check. And they forget that the entire sort of revenue map matches this buyer experience, and it doesn't start and end with them. I mean, if you're looking at some of the most recent data, a seller might not even touch the buyer in their buying experience, their buyer's journey, whatever, until we're 80% of the way through it. So I do think
which then means they better have had a good experience to get to you.
For sure.
Because if they hadn't, they're out.
Referrals and word of mouth, and are people talking about them in community? Yeah, it's very multifaceted. Yes. All right, let's talk about Neat. So I'm gonna drop it. I'm gonna drop it here in the chat just so folks have it for reference. Tell me. Well, maybe for assuming that maybe some folks haven't read the book yet.
How dare they?
Tell them where to order a copy, and then give us the definition of Neat, just to sort of level set before we dig in more.
By the way, I want that snippet of me just saying, how dare they?
How dare they? We'll just play that over and over again.
How dare they? How dare they? How dare they? So obviously Amazon, you can get it barnesandnoble.com. You can get it online everywhere around the world. That's the easiest thing. The audiobook just came out about 2 months ago, so I'm excited about that. Yeah. If you like the sound of my voice and you want to hear Richard read and curse, because that's what's in the book, then listen to Richard's audiobook. But what does NEAT stand for? It stands for need. The economic impact of that need that a buyer experiences or will experience because of the problem they have. Then it's about access to authority. A is access to authority, because we're never going to get to authority. We're only going to get to skeptics. So we need to figure out our access to authority. And then, of course, timeline. Timeline matters still, right? When, whatever methodology, philosophy you want to follow, timeline's sort of always there. And so for me, when I created it, I was just trying to go a layer or two deeper than, things like Medic and Bant or Anim or gap selling. And I wanted it to resonate in a way that people like, oh, I kind of know what that means. Like access to authority. There's nobody in sales who doesn't understand exactly what that means and why it's a challenge versus authority. Right. And we all know now too, that, there's 6.84 times pi r squared, number of decision makers in the decision-making process. So that's where that philosophy came from. So.
All right. I have a lot of questions. I want to dig in deeper. So this is probably going to get me with folks, but I still think BANT, which is budget authority need timeline, is the right qualifying framework for a lot of products. I mean, I know people are like, BANT. It still works, folks.
Yeah.
This seems similar to BANT, which is something that I really liked about it. It feels easy, like it feels accessible. Like you said, like I understand why these elements are important. I understand how they stack together. Was that part of inspiration? Was that like BANT is good, it still works? Tell me about how you
created this. So I created it on a cocktail napkin. John Barrows was with me when I did it one night, and I was really, this was early in my consulting, and I was just trying to like create something to try and differentiate. Like I was just trying to figure something out. And I'll tell you why I don't like BANT and why I think people use it wrong or wrongly. I'm not sure what the right grammar is there. But I was really just trying to differentiate myself. And originally I was going to call it Nate, and I was going to have this little character, right? Nate was going to be the salesperson. And then I was just, squirming it around, and I was like, oh, I could do NEAT, N-E-A-T, and then I could incorporate a compass because that flows with sales, right? So there's N is north, economic impact is east, access to authority is south, and timeline. So I was able to put this compass thing in there, and then again, that resonated for me. There it is. Oh, thank you.
Got it.
That resonated for me because I don't believe sales follows a particular order of operations, right? It feels like we start with need a lot, right? But that's not always the case. I think, those of us who've been in sales long enough to know that, sometimes you get on a call with someone, they're like, well, my boss told me to do this, or I'm on the exploratory committee, which now means you're kind of talking about access to authority for just a second before you're talking about, well, what are you guys trying to solve, which is then need. So it just, it just felt better as NEAT. And then I could trademark it, which I did just because I was like, okay, I'm trying to differentiate myself. So that was the genesis of it. So.
Smart. I like it. I'd love to hear from people that are joining us, what methodology they are using, or maybe they're not using a methodology quite yet. And one of the reasons that I'm curious about this, so as you know, I'm in the final days of finishing my manuscript for my book. What a wonderful but humbling process it is to write a book. No working title, Earn the Right, a buyer-centric guide to pipeline creation. And something that I have long been very conscientious about is not calling Earn the Right a qualifying framework. Like I'll maybe call it a philosophy or just a framework, sometimes a methodology, but I'm very, very, very careful not to call it a qualifying framework because I frankly don't want to go head to head with Medic or BANT or GAP or SPIN or SNAP or whatever those methodologies are out there. Like I really want it to be in complement, in support of that. You were like, fuck it, we're going head to head.
So there's a couple of things, right? So, and you and I've had this conversation offline, right? Is that, and it's in my book all the time, is that, I've been saying for, 10 years, you got to earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask and when. When people ask me, what do? I don't say I'm a sales trainer. I tell them the pain I solve, which is I teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions. And so again, I was trying to differentiate, and then a woman who I really, really respect, described it, and she said that, you know, what's really cool about Neat is that it can bolt on to anything. Right. And I was like, oh, this is really good. And so she made me realize, um, and her name is Charisma, believe it or not, really, that's her name. She made me realize that, which is what I believed, is that you don't rip and replace. You don't rip and replace Medic or Bant just because Richard shows up and has this cool thing called Neat. In many ways, Neat bolts onto those places, right? Neat is a framework. So for some people, Neat becomes a methodology.
Yeah.
For some, it becomes a process. And for others, it's just a philosophy that helps simplify something that they're already doing. So I don't think you have to rip and replace Medic and replace it, put in Neat. If you've got Medic, you can use Neat to understand how to use the framework of Medic. So that's when I sort of realized, I'm kind of going head to head, but not really. Right. And I think people are like the idea that I say you shouldn't rip and replace. What I do know, and I think you've seen it too, is that one of the first things a VP of sales does is they come in and rip and replace something because they feel like they need to, show their peacock feathers and show they've done something. Well, that's really not the problem. If Medic didn't work, it could possibly be the wrong thing. It could be over-engineered. Medic traditionally isn't a great transactional sales process methodology. Right. It's too robust. But a lot of times, if nobody was coaching to Medic in the first place, well, then is it because Medic was the wrong thing or because leadership didn't coach to it? Right. So that's why I don't think you have to rip and replace. And that's why I don't think you can make Neat whatever you want it to be to work alongside that stuff.
Yeah. Let's stay on this just a little bit longer, Richard, because and it sounds like maybe you've seen some of this as well, but when I audit a company's sales strategy,
Mm-hmm.
one of the baseline, first questions I always ask is, what is your qualifying framework?
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to surprise me how few organizations have a specific qualifying framework, or maybe they have one and it's like a Medic and it's just sort of become a check the box activity, or they say they use Medic, but they don't actually use it. They just have it and don't adhere to it. And the result is a lot of time being wasted on the wrong leads earlier in the funnel. Certainly, it's a huge impact on win rates. You see a lot of closed lost deals later in the funnel, and they're opportunities that never really should have been opportunities. So if somebody is listening to this right now, a seller, a sales leader, and they're thinking, oh my God, yes, that's what we are struggling with. What advice would you give them?
Yeah. I have a rule that says if you have any deals in your pipeline that are 2x your average sales cycle, you have to kill them. Those are not opportunities. Those are leads and tasks. And people are sitting there staring at their pipeline in the CRM system going, nothing's going to close. And I got 22 things in here. Well, it's because you got 22 things in there and you're feeling weighted down. And if you got down to the 6 that really mattered, you'd realize how much time you had to go out and do some prospecting and go figure it out. Now, there is an exception. If that deal is in your pipeline more than 2x your regular sales cycle, and I say this as a nice Jewish kid, if you can get me a note from the Pope that tells me with validity why that deal needs to stay in your pipeline, I'm down with it. I get it. There are outliers, but you better have a note from the Pope, right? You better have a really good reason. And the rest of that stuff you need to get rid of, right?
Yeah.
It's like Haley Jones Osborne. It's like, I see dead people. I see dead deals, which were never deals in the first place. So that's my first piece of advice is clean that stuff out of there. And I agree with you. I think the challenge is that people have all these check boxes in the CRM. And I think you and I have the same philosophy as well. I need to have certain exit criteria to move from one stage to the next. Part of the challenge is people don't know how to ask the questions in a meaningful way to really confirm that they've asked the question to check the box. Right? Yeah. There could be a thing like, we've discussed commercial terms. Well, I can check that box, but that doesn't necessarily mean I've got the right answer. So what does that really mean?
Right.
We've agreed to commercial terms. I've been introduced to procurement. I've, there's 100 other things that can mean. So we have to teach the team the underlying elements of each of those check boxes, and then how to actually talk to them about it.
So important. I mean, one of the easiest audits I always recommend for folks is if there are no mutually agreed to next steps, mutually agreed to, the buyer has agreed to the next step, it's probably not a real deal. So you either need to get that mutually agreed to next step and get it in the next, couple of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, or it's, probably an indication that the timing isn't right. So on the timing piece, the T in NEAT, somebody is working on an earlier stage deal. Maybe they're an SDR, maybe they're an AE, and it's sort of at that discovery step. What type of question should they be asking to see if the timeline aligns?
If it's real.
Yeah, if it's real. Yeah.
So one, I think you have to ask the question of, when do you want this implemented? And someone will say, oh, we wanted it yesterday. It's like, okay, I got it. Yeah, haha, that's funny. But in reality, it's like, okay, but does that really mean like September 30th, October 30th, et cetera? And you get them to you have to nail them down to a date. And then you just have to say, so Leslie, what happens if you don't meet that timeline? If there's no negative consequence or detrimental result to not hitting that timeline, then it's just a line in the sand. Now, where you are in the conversation matters, right? If you're SDR, BDR, or it's the first call with an AE, that timeline might be a line in the sand because we haven't done enough to drive to economic impact to get them to tell you how painful this is from a financial perspective if they don't solve the problem. So this is that part of, well, how do I create urgency? By driving to economic impact.
Yeah.
Right? Again, I can drive someone to economic impact pretty quick just because I do it all the time. And I can run it out on a lifetime value of the situation. So that creates a certain level of urgency. And certainly it has a financial implication. However, there are still 12 other projects the company's considering internally. That I may not be able to adjust that, right? I at least can say, well, how do those projects relate to this if your pain is $2 million a year? Like, where do we now fall within the pecking order? And they'll say, oh, well, it's pretty important. It's like, okay, but how important? Like, we're now number one on the list? Because if we're not number one on the list, you can tell me. You're not going to offend me. In fact, Leslie, if I'm not number one on the list, then you need to tell me because I don't need to bug you. Because if you walk out of here telling me that, oh yeah, this is really important. Well, you're going to get a bunch of emails and phone calls from me. So let's save each other some ghosting time and tell me where we really are. And if the answer is, well, I don't know where we are yet on the pecking order. Okay, that's great. That's a very viable piece of information I need to know, right? Like I need to know. So then I can say, well, great, Leslie, while you're doing this, should I check in with you every week, every 2 weeks? Is this a, don't call us, we'll call you? Again, Leslie, that's totally fine to say. I just don't want to bug you. I just don't want to let it slip through the cracks from my side of the fence. Right. So that's how you drive to timeline, and you have to push and press. Right. I think sometimes people are more scared to ask about timeline than they are about money and budget.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much meaty stuff there. Like a couple of things that really jumped out at me. I mean, one of my favorite, like I always ask questions on discovery calls is you're going through all the priorities and then you name back the priorities. And it's like, all right, Richard, I heard 5 different priorities. Which is at the top of the list? And then they tell me, oh, it's, priorities at, okay. So is priority X the most important thing for you to solve for in the next 3 to 6 months, or what's more important? And you just keep pushing on that. Like, what is the most important priority and what is the time box in which you need to solve for it? And I really learned how important that was when I was selling to HR. Because a lot of their problems are evergreen problems. So they were saying, oh, it's so important to deal with retention. It's so important to upskill the team. and then you find out that that's been the same priority that they've had on their priority list for the last 7 years, and they've never
Right,
really
right,
done
right.
anything to change it. They're not going to do anything to change it. So it's not that they're lying, like it is a priority, but without having that like clear visibility on what the economic impact is, what that ROI is, or more appropriately, like what that cost of inaction is,
Hmm.
there's no way that you're going to get it to the top of the list, and not just at the
Nope.
top of the list, but at the top of the list, and getting them to agree with you that it's something they're going to
Hmm.
commit to solving for in that, 3, 6, 12-month
Yeah.
timeline.
And by the way, like, I think you know this too. It could be that this is the most important thing, but financially they can't afford it. So they financially choose something else.
Yeah.
Right. And so we can, my goal, and I think we've never talked about it this way, but I think we have the same philosophy, is when I train people, I want them to be able to go to bed at night knowing that they've asked the right questions, to get the answers, even if they're answers they don't like. And most importantly, I want to be able to go to bed at night knowing that they can tell their manager, dude, I've done this. Here's the exact thing they've said when we talked about timeline and urgency and other projects or commercial terms. Like, I want a rep to be able to go to bed at night thinking that and knowing that they've done the best they can. And that doesn't mean we can't do better. We always can. You've been in the game. I've been in the game long enough to know that, like, shoot, I should have asked this, or, oh, I could have asked that. Like, that happens. Like, we're all normal that way. I just want people to know that I'm on their side, that I want to take away this emotional struggle we often have as much as I can, and sort of allow people, teach people to give themselves the grace and the space to be a human through this process, right? And teach them how to do it in a way that they can feel like they've given themselves enough space and grace to do this and get their boss off their back.
Yeah, I love that. And like something else that I heard come out is sort of the balance of pushing with also asking questions in a way that gives your buyers an out. Because like if
Mm-hmm.
I'm number 6 out of a list of 8,
Yeah,
this is
tell
like,
me.
I don't want to spend my time on this. I don't want to bother you on this. And I heard you
Yeah.
use the word urgency, which I love. Like one of my favorite topics is helping reps distinguish between urgency and sales pressure. And the way I always envision it is that urgency is something that's very much felt with it from within. Like
Mm-hmm.
they are compelled by that timeline. They are
Yes.
compelled by avoiding the pain or capturing the gain, versus sales pressure is like, okay, well, I need an answer on this next week, or I'll give
Yeah.
you 15 for 12, or my manager said I need this in this
Yeah.
quarter. And it's just these very like seller centric ways of
Yeah.
moving deals
That's
forward.
not urgency.
No,
That's
it's
desperation.
sales pressure. Yes. Yeah. So I love hearing the word urgency, and that balance of like, how can we work together towards this timeline that we've agreed that you want to hit for XYZ reasons, versus me just following up with you again and again and again until you block my email or tell me to, screw
Mm-hmm.
off. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, let's move on to a couple pieces of the book that I want to make sure that we get to. One was about ego states. I thought this was really interesting. I've not read this in other books. So in chapter 4, sales is always personal. You talk a bit about ego states. What are they, and how do they apply to the seller's journey?
Yeah, so this is nothing new, and lots of people have talked about this.
I
but
haven't read it
it's
in other sales books.
yeah, so it's there.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm not going to mention it. But so it is a psychological belief system created by Dr. Eric Berne back in the 1950s. And it basically says we have 3 ego states as humans, and it's way better and easier to understand, in my opinion, than the id, the ego, and the superego. We have a child ego state that starts the process, and we recognize that child ego state that says, I want it, right? And it's where your emotions are stored. So when you lose a deal and it hurts, that's your inner child, right? Just like when someone breaks up with you, it hurts, right? So you have a child ego state, and generally speaking, that's where sales starts, right? There's an experience aligned to, I want something to solve this pain. You also have a parent ego state, which is the ego state that passes judgment, just like my mom when she comes to town. Like
She's not
I'm
mad. She's just disappointed.
right. Well, this is the true story is this is why there's a 2-state buffer rule between me and any immediate family member. She lives in Georgia and I live in California. And the parent ego state, though, is the ego state that says, is this right or wrong? Is this appropriate or inappropriate? Right? Is Richard the right trainer? Is Leslie the right trainer? Right? Is this the right approach we should be taking? Do we need to rip and replace something? Right? So, and it's a very healthy part of our existence, right? It's the one that keeps us, for lack of a better phrase, on the straight and narrow, right? It's the one that helps us stay true and be humans. And then you have an adult ego state, and that's the ego state that does pros and cons and pluses and minuses and upsides and downsides. And, I sort of look at it like, like if you go to, here in the States, because I know we got people from around the world, you go to, Best Buy is the big electronics store, and you're like, you're looking for a new TV and you hit the compare button and you pop up the 3 TVs so you can see the columns of what does everything look like. You're going through all 3 of those ego states, right? Your child wants a new TV. Your parents trying to figure out, well, what's the right TV? And your adult ego state's trying to figure out, well, what's the pros and cons of each of these TVs, right? Does it have all the things that I want, right? And that adult ego state is the one that gives you permission to move forward. That's the one that says, yes, we can, hey, Leslie, how about we schedule a call for next week? Well, the person, Leslie, then has to go through this child ego state real quick of, well, do I want to have another call? Leslie could say, well, is it the right time or do I have other stuff on my plate? Like, is it the right time to do this? And then Leslie could say, yeah, you know what? It is worth us having that call next week or the week after. So the parent ego state's the one that gives that allows us to move forward. It's the parent ego state you're trying to get to when you're trying to establish next steps. Right. And that's the philosophy of it. I talk about it. I teach it. I don't want people to walk out being experts of recognizing these ego states. We talk about it when I train people, like, where have you run into these ego states? But what I want people to know from that exercise or hearing this piece is that this is just how humans react. Your customer and your prospect's allowed to be a human, just like you're allowed to be a human. The big thing I talk about in the book too is like, we need to bring humanity back into sales, right? And I've been saying this for long before AI. And it's just that AI's made it even more rational to say that. And to bring humanity back into sales, we have to understand a little bit about what humanity means, right? It's okay if someone doesn't select or choose us. It's okay if they will go with a competitor. It's okay if they choose us over someone else. It's okay if I get bothered by it or I get upset. It's okay if I get defensive when I hear the competitor's name brought up. I mean, everybody's just a human. So, like, again, let's give ourselves a little space and grace. It doesn't mean we're like, okay, I lost that deal. No, that's not what I'm saying. Do, right? Strawberry shortcake. Oh yeah. Happy little Care Bears. But I do want people to recognize you're just being a human.
I think it's great. I find the psychology behind the work we do so deeply fascinating. And I know that this is something else that we've bonded on, like, especially on LinkedIn. So often the posts are just the what. And people will do, and even with like the sales methodologies, like a medic, like people understand the what. And so they sort of do it, but they kind of by default half-ass it because they don't understand the why behind it. So I thought that this was a great chapter.
And that's a big reason of why I teach it, is that I want people to understand why the tactics and strategies that we're talking about work, because they try to bring this human element that it tries to connect them to, oh, now I understand why I should say it that way, rather than here's a script. I don't want anybody to sound scripted. I want them to know how to say something so they know where it's driving to that emotional experience, to that buyer's experience, because that's what's going to matter.
I love it. You're trying to bring, a human-centered design back to sales. Scott
Mhm.
is preparing for the takeover of our robot overlords. So it makes
Right.
sense that you guys are best friends. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. He is yeah. We that's a great I need that snippet too. I need that like that. I've got to send that to Scott. He's the overlord.
Oh
Oh,
my
that's
gosh.
hilarious. So,
Amazing.
and but for those, by the way, for those who don't know, Scott Leese is a good friend of ours. He's a very smart sales leader. If you don't follow him on LinkedIn, he has great wisdom. So as much as I give him a hard time all the time, but he is a very smart guy, and I would be happy to recommend you follow him and even buy his books that he's written. And you know, just don't ever send this clip that I said to him.
Don't
But,
tell him that we said nice things about him,
right, right,
but
right. Yeah,
you
he's a great
buy his
guy,
books,
really
go to
smart guy.
Perkin Sales, follow him,
Yeah,
all of those things.
yeah.
Okay, I want to fast forward to chapter 7 before we get into a couple rapid
Mhm,
fires. And it's a perfect segue because we're talking about like
mhm,
being human, and what is more human than hearing an objection and handling rejection and being human in the face of
mhm,
objection.
mhm,
So chapter 7 is titled Objection and Competition Tactics, and
mhm,
you open the chapter by pleading with us, pleading with the reader to stop handling objections
mhm,
and to start marinating in
mhm,
that.
mhm, mhm.
Why should we marinate in an objection?
Well, because my wife says she doesn't like to be handled. Um, that's the truth to that. But
Who does, right?
right, exactly.
Nobody
Nobody
likes
wants to
that
be handled.
feeling.
Nobody
Yeah.
wants to be handled. Um, and again, and I've done this, like I did this, right? We had the big book of objections, and here's what you say when they bring up the competition, or here's what you say when they bring up price, or here's what they say when you bring up blah blah
Yeah.
blah, right? Like the and
And
again,
it was
I've done the same thing.
bulldozing people.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, that's a great way. Objections are just bulldozers. You're doing it wrong. That's a great story. Um, put that in the book. The When someone brings up an objection, one, sometimes it's not even a real objection.
Yeah.
We just assume that it is, and we need to spend time talking about it. And I'll give you the simple example. And so we should understand that. The simplest example is sometimes they'll bring up the competition and a particular feature. Hey, can you do this like so and so does this? And we're like, oh, well, yeah, we can. And and we now all of a sudden we go into, product feature, feature benefit dumping, right? When in fact we should marinate there and go, yes, we do, or no, we don't. Because if you don't, you need to tell them straight up. Don't tell them your workaround, but you
It's
could
on the
say,
roadmap, Richard.
right, yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, Leslie, we don't currently do that. I'm curious though, Leslie, how important is that particular feature to you making this decision? Because that's what I need to know when they bring up an objection. I need to know how important that objection is to them actually making the decision. Right.
Yeah.
And then if they say, well, actually, it's pretty important, then you could say, if you have a workaround, and don't say, well, we have this workaround, because everybody then just knows you're trying to bullshit them. You can then just say, hey, Leslie, well, here's how we do this. Would this be, would this work enough for you to choose us over them? You have to marinate in this competition conversation to figure out where you are. You cannot
Yeah.
just handle the objection, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part that reps have not been taught how to do. Their sales leaders were never taught how to do it, so they don't know how to teach them to do this either, right? They're just regurgitating the same BS that they were taught. And then the leadership and the sales executives and the CEO all get angry that they didn't ask that question. And it's like, well, why haven't you taught me to ask that question, idiot? Like, you tell me. Like, if so I get really frustrated about this stuff because leaders want to blame reps for things that they shouldn't, that they've
Yeah,
never
I
taught them
mean,
in the first
that could
place.
be a whole nother
Right.
LinkedIn Live
Right. It's
where
like
we
how many people have ever gotten pipped because they couldn't close a deal, but there was no specific tactic that they said they were going to teach you to help you close the deal.
And when you went to the pipeline update meeting, your
Right.
manager just had you read out of your CRM instead of
Yeah.
creating any sort of actionable
Yeah.
strategy or coaching on any
Yeah.
skill sets or role playing.
Yeah. Well,
No,
here, by the way,
that's a
I'm
seamless
gonna take us on a quick
experience.
tangent. I'm gonna take us on a quick
Okay.
tangent because I had this revelation literally this week. We now have all these call recordings, right? Going in, and we can now put our call recording and our emails and our text messages all in the system to, tell us where we are in the deal. You know what's not in the deal? You know what's not in there? Why are we not recording the conversation at my pipeline level? Why am I not recording my conversation with my IT person to figure out what the solution is? Why am I not putting my conversation there with my InfoSec person? So all these internal meetings are missing from the forecast. And you want to know why they're not there? Because the leaders are afraid they're going to get found out for being stupid. Right. That's why they're not there. Now, the reality is nobody's thought about it. Right. Nobody's really thought about it. And it's like, I've talked to like 12 people this week and they're like, Jesus, why aren't we doing that? Because that is half of the conversation. Right. And it's like, oh, well, now I could connect these conversations of like, oh, here's where I am on the security side of the house. Here's where I am on the legal side. Here's where I am on the negotiation side. Because what happens? Well, where are we internally on the legal side of the house? Well, what if we recorded that conversation, put it with all the other stuff we have with the sales calls, and now this AI will tell us really what's missing. So anyway, hot take, totally different tangent. We can get off of it, but
no, I like it. I like it a lot because yes, it's so true. I'm testing a new conversational intelligence bot right now from a company called Sybil.
I know Sybil. Yeah. I've done work with them. They're really good.
The tech is good. But one of the things that they have that I just have not seen in other conversational intelligence bots is that they do deal level summaries. And so they'll look at every conversation that you had with anybody in the organization, and then they give you
that's only half of it.
And I'm like, oh my, but that isn't even what's happening. Like most of the summaries you get are like, you talked for 52% during this call. And it's like, okay.
No, there's tons of them out there. They're all gonna aggregate. I know that, next week, Salesforce is going to put Agentforce out there, which does all this stuff too. They provide all this feedback. So it's just going to be an interesting, at some point, all these tools. Yeah. The interesting thing is all these conversational intelligence tools and equally important, the training tools, right? All the AI bots that we can now train on and role play with and stuff. Everything, when it's innovative, it's a product. Because of the way the AI world is moving so fast, it's now becoming a feature. Right. So for example, if I'm going to use one of those sales training tools where I can record and role play 50 times in a day, that's really cool. But really, that's just a feature of a call recording, software. So it's just going to be interesting. The next 6 to 12 months is going to be super interesting in this particular space, in my opinion.
I agree. I think in general, because of the massive influx of new AI tech, we're going to see a tremendous amount of mergers happening. And just the state of VC, I think we're going to see a lot of growth through acquisition. We're going to see a lot of mergers happening. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel like right now, if somebody's like, oh, I only have, $500 to spend on my tech stack, that having a conversational intelligence tool is that's a non-negotiable for me. I don't know. I can't imagine that I can't imagine the time that we didn't have that sort of tool and access and insight. So I'm very excited to see them level up. You have a chat version, don't you have a chat
I
version?
put one together on my site that's focused specifically on my content. So people can go, it's free. You can go to the harrisconsultinggroup.com. It's called Coach Richard, and I had a little Minecraft character made up of me. Probably should call him Nate, but and you can go ask it all kinds of stuff. It'll help you write emails. It's like any other bot. And it's just based on my philosophies, and it pulls from my book, and it pulls from all my blog posts, and it pulls so that it sounds like Richard. And I am going to be working on getting my a digital version of that where you can actually just have a conversation with me, not necessarily role playing, although we may put that in there, but just like rather than typing your questions, you can ask the question and have a conversation. So,
Okay,
and I'm just
that's
playing around with it. Like
really fun.
I don't know if I'll productize it or not, but I think it's teaching me a lot about the early adopters of AI and how they want to use these things. Right. That's for me why I'm doing it. I don't know what I'll build out of it. I don't know if I'll build anything out of it, but it certainly lets me play in the space a little bit. And what I feel like is a helpful way for me to learn so that I can keep giving back to the community. Like I do track like, well, what questions are being asked the most? And then that becomes a blog post for me.
Ooh,
Right.
that's smart.
So that's kind of how I'm using it to see what that is.
And where can people find that again?
Yeah, theharrisconsultinggroup.com. So
the Harris. It's free. Go
it's
ask,
free.
go role play objections.
Yep.
So that you can marinate in them. And I dropped 2 links in the chat. One is a free giveaway. It's an objection workbook. And then also just a reminder to buy Richard's book, either the physical copy, or did you say the audio book is out?
Yeah, there's a digital, there's a Kindle version and there's an audio version and there's a physical version. And, it's the only book I know that has a money back guarantee. It's in the first chapter. If you hate my book and you think it's terrible, I'll send you your money. You can keep the book. I'll send you the money back. I'll Venmo you. I'll PayPal you. I'll use whatever. Whatever you want. Yeah. It's $12. Like if you don't like it, okay, fine. So
that would be. Has anybody done it?
No.
I feel like I just don't know if I'd have the courage to be like
the courage to do it. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah. Like the first sentence of my book is my email address. Like,
I know.
Here's my email address.
415. What's the 415? Is that what it is? 415. What's the 415 for?
Richard at rharris415.com. 415 is the area code for San Francisco. So
got it. So, that's like my old Hotmail address.
Yeah,
exactly. It was just like a bunch of random shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we wrap, one really tactical question for folks, because we are days away from Q4.
Yes.
What is one thing that sellers need to do before the end of this month to set themselves up to close more deals in Q4?
You need to ask a couple of questions. First question is, are you already in the redlining and legal process? Because if you're not, and what is today, September 12th, it's going to be tough. Short of it being a transactional sale, right? That's number one. Number two is you need to ask this question, and I will say this to the managers. Like I learned a while ago that the best question to ask when you're doing pipeline reviews as a manager to a rep is to say, hey, Leslie, what's the one thing that's preventing this deal from closing before September 30th? And the reason you ask it that way, first of all, it's super simple. Hey, everybody, when we do our pipeline reviews this week, I'm going to ask you this question, right? The reason it works so well is that there's rarely one thing. So and I think we've all been there where it's like, so where are we on this? What do we got to do to get this over the finish line? It's like, well, I got to do this. And I've kind of talked to this person. But it's very ambiguous.
Yeah.
But when I say, what's the one thing, people bring up 1, 2, and 3 things. Well, I need this because it forces them to think and they go, well, shit, it's not really one thing. It's these very specific things. So those are the 2 things I would encourage people to think about is, if you're not in legal, you better figure out how to get there. And what's the one thing preventing this deal? And now, back to our favorite word in sales, now you have a roadmap of what it's going to take to get the deal closed. Right.
Great insight.
And what is the potential reality of that? Which, by the way, if you think about it, reinforces this concept of why are the internal conversations we're having not recorded and added to our forecast in the pipeline, because that would be the part of the reality. That's a big piece of the reality that's missing.
I love it. I can't wait for that feature to get rolled out. I'll be like, Richard talked about it first.
Well, it's not even a feature. Look, every call we are on is on Zoom. It's not that hard. Like you just do it, right? It doesn't have to be long. Right. So
I think it's brilliant. Folks, go buy The Seller's Journey. Richard, where should they follow you in case they aren't already?
yeah. So this is really crazy. So everybody write this down. +1 415 596 9149. 415 596 9149. It's my real number. It's the number my kids avoid. I have 2 teenage boys. They don't answer when I call them, but I know it's the real number. They only call when they need something. So that's, you can get a hold of me there. Obviously, you can find me at the Harris Consulting Group. You can find me at thesellersjourney.co. I'm also Richard Harris on LinkedIn. I'm the one with the little TM emoji. Yes, I know you cannot trademark your name. I was just the first guy to put emojis in my profile back in 2010. So fuck off everybody else who stole my idea.
Amazing. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. For everybody else that joined, thank you so much. If you want to learn more about joining the Closed Door Business Book Club sessions, next month is Amy Edmondson's The Right Kind of Wrong. You can head to Patreon to learn more about that. What a treat. Thank you for writing this book and for taking the time
Thank you for having me. We know each other, but these are the most fun conversations where it just feels really organic. And I appreciate the support and promoting, and looking forward to your book. And thank you to everybody who either gave up their time today or giving up time later watching the recording. I really do appreciate it. I thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Bye, everybody.